The word unprecedented gets used too freely in weather coverage. It gets attached to wet Tuesdays and slightly chilly Aprils and storms that are perfectly ordinary if you check the archive. But what the BBC is confirming this week, what the Met Office's own data is establishing in real time, is the kind of event that earns that word honestly. The UK has already shattered the record for the hottest ever start to May. Kew Gardens in London. Recorded 29.3 degrees Celsius on May 1st, beating the previous May 1st record of 27.4 degrees set in Lossiemouth, Scotland in 1990. Then the temperatures kept climbing. Then the Met Office confirmed England had its warmest spring on record. Then 32 degrees. Then 33 degrees. And now the forecast has silenced the usual British instinct to dismiss warm weather predictions before they verify. 35 degrees Celsius, potentially, before this heat wave reaches its peak. In May. On a day that would, if it verifies, become the hottest May day ever recorded. Not just in recent memory, but in the entire history of systematic UK temperature measurement. The BBC has confirmed the historic nature of what is unfolding. The records are falling in sequence. And the question is no longer whether this is a significant heat event. The question is how far it goes. The sequence of broken records that has led to this moment tells the story of a heat wave that has been building and escalating across multiple days, rewriting the record books with each successive peak. The year opened with May 1st, delivering 29.3 degrees Celsius at Kew Gardens. The BBC confirmed this as the hottest ever start to any May on record, beating the previous benchmark by 1.9 degrees in a single afternoon. That record stood for days before the warm spell intensified further. Then came the reading that the BBC confirmed as the new hottest day of 2026, to that point, 32.2 degrees Celsius at Kew and Heathrow, higher than the previous 2026 high of 29.3 degrees set just days earlier. Then the heat wave continued building. The Met Office provisionally recorded 33.2 degrees Celsius in Charlwood, Surrey on the following Saturday. Each of those numbers represented a new hottest day of the year. Each of them fell within the same sustained warm spell, and the 35-degree projection that now sits at the top of the forecast range, the number that would make this the most extraordinary May temperature event in UK recorded history, is not a model outlier. It is the upper end of a forecast that the BBC's meteorological coverage has confirmed is credible. The atmospheric mechanics driving this extraordinary sequence are the same pattern that has produced every significant UK heat event of recent years, but operating at an intensity that the combination of climate change forcing and the specific synoptic configuration of 2026 has amplified beyond what previous comparable events delivered. A blocking high-pressure system became anchored over the British Isles, creating the stable dome of descending, compressing, warming air that cuts off Atlantic cloud and rain systems from reaching the UK. A sustained southeasterly and southerly airflow has been drawing warm continental and Saharan air northward across France and the English Channel, delivering air masses with a thermal signature that belongs to southern European late spring rather than British May. The BBC weather team confirmed the mechanism precisely. An area of high pressure which had become blocked over the UK, leading to a sustained southeasterly airflow bringing warm conditions. When that blocking pattern sustains across multiple days, rather than shifting as it normally would, the heat accumulates. Each morning starts from a warmer overnight minimum than the one before. The peak afternoon temperature climbs incrementally, and the record that seemed safely out of reach one day becomes the number on the forecast map the next. The official heatwave declaration that followed this sequence confirms the event's status under the Met Office's formal IA definition. Suffolk became the first area to enter official heatwave conditions when temperatures exceeded 27 degrees, its specific regional threshold, for 3 consecutive days. Official heatwave conditions then spread across England and Wales as the warm spell extended and intensified. The Met Office's heatwave thresholds, which vary from 25 degrees Celsius in northern and western regions to 28 degrees Celsius in London and the southeast, were being exceeded simultaneously across multiple regions, a geographic breadth of simultaneous official heatwave conditions that is rare in any month, let alone in May, when the population has had no seasonal warming to prepare against it. The UKHSA issued amber heat health alerts covering all regions of England, the second highest alert designation, carrying the official language of likely rise in deaths and likely increased pressures on health and social care services. An amber alert covering all of England simultaneously in May is an event without recent precedent in the UKHSA alert system's operational history. The 35 degrees Celsius projection that sits at the upper end of the current forecast range, the number the BBC has confirmed as possible before this heatwave peaks, needs its historical context clearly established. The all-time UK temperature record is 40.3 degrees Celsius, set at Coningsby in Lincolnshire on July 19, 2022. The previous all-time record before that was 38.7 degrees Celsius at Cambridge in July 2019, but these are July figures. The all-time UK May temperature record is significantly lower, 32.8 degrees Celsius at Camden Square in London in May 1922, a figure the Royal Meteorological Society's peer-reviewed attribution study acknowledged carries some site exposure reservations, but which has stood in the record books for 104 years. More recently, the BBC confirmed 33.2 degrees Celsius at Charlwood, Surrey, as the new provisional record for May 2026. If the forecast trajectory continues toward 35 degrees, it does not just break the 1922 figure by a fraction. It shatters it by more than 2 degrees, a margin of record breaking that would be extraordinary in any month, and that in May specifically represents a departure from historical norms that has no parallel in the modern meteorological record. The health consequences of this unprecedented May heat are being measured in real time by the health and social care systems across England, the research teams at the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine and Imperial College London projected approximately 570 heat-related deaths across England and Wales over the 4 peak days of the bank holiday heatwave, with London projected to contribute 129 of those deaths. Professor Antonio Gasparini of the LSHTM stated explicitly that every fraction of a degree of warming will cause more hospital admissions and heat deaths, putting more strain on the NHS. Those projections were made against a peak temperature expectation in the low to mid-30s. If the event pushes toward 35 degrees, the mortality projection requires upward revision. The temperature-mortality relationship in the UK epidemiological data is not linear. It accelerates at the top of the range, meaning each additional degree above the established threshold produces proportionally more excess deaths than the degree below it. A 35-degree May day arriving in an unacclimatized population, following a cold snap just 3 weeks earlier, sits at the extreme end of the range where that accelerating relationship has its most acute expression. The NHS England operational response to the Amber Alert covering all regions has been confirmed across multiple NHS Trust communications. Emergency departments across London, the Midlands, and the South East have activated elevated heat readiness protocols, increasing monitoring of at-risk patients, reviewing ward thermal management, briefing staff on heat illness, recognition pathways, and coordinating with ambulance services on the anticipated surge in heat-related presentations. The specific call volume pattern that NHS ambulance services have documented from previous Amber Alert events shows that heat-related calls concentrate in the 2 p.m. to 6 p.m. window on peak temperature days, with the most time-critical presentations arriving in the final 2 hours of that window when body temperature has been accumulating across the full afternoon. A 35-degree peak day produces a 2 p.m. to 6 p.m. window of heat stress that extends significantly beyond what an NHS Trust calibrated for normal spring operations was designed to manage. The Met Office's Dr. Amy Doherty placed the science unambiguously. It is virtually certain that human influence has increased the occurrence and intensity of extreme heat events such as this, and Met Office climate projections indicate that hot spells will become more frequent, particularly over the southeast. The records being broken extend beyond temperature to encompass the broader seasonal climate picture that this heat wave is producing. The BBC confirmed that England had its warmest June on record, a statement that applies to the preceding month, establishing the pattern of record setting that the May event is continuing. The Met Office confirmed that England's June 2025 mean temperature of 16.9 degrees Celsius topped the previous record. The UK's second warmest June since records began in 1884 provided the seasonal foundation from which the current May 2026 event is launching. The progression: warmest spring on record, hottest ever. May 1st, Amber Alerts across all of England, provisional 33-degree readings with 35-degree projections still in range, is not a collection of isolated weather events. It is a trajectory. Each record on that list sits on a trend line that the Met Office's own Climate Science Division has confirmed is driven by human-induced warming at virtually certain confidence levels. The infrastructure story of a 35-degree May day builds directly on the documented damage record of every previous UK heat event, and adds the specific dimension of infrastructure systems that entered the warm spell in spring rather than summer operational configuration. Network Rail's heat management escalation began as temperatures entered the low to mid-20s and has progressively intensified through each record-setting peak day. Rail surface temperatures on fully exposed track sections, which run more than 20 degrees above ambient air in direct sunlight, at a 35-degree air temperature would translate to surface readings approaching 55 degrees Celsius on the most exposed sections of the Southeast Rail Corridor. Parliamentary evidence from Network Rail confirmed that service-affecting failures double during hot weather periods, and that the 2003 European heatwave produced 137 rail buckles at a cost of $2.5 million in a single event. The 2022 July event, when temperatures reached 40.3 degrees at Coningsby, produced suspended services across multiple routes, including Thameslink and Great Northern, line-side fires from breaking sparks, and damage assessments extending days beyond the heat event. A 35-degree May event, arriving before the seasonal maintenance window that prepares the network for summer thermal loads, tested on track that has not had the pre-summer inspection cycle completed, presents a specific infrastructure challenge that rail operations management has been responding to in real time throughout this week's escalating heat. During the hottest midday hours from June to September, it would exceed the average May maximum temperature of Cairo, Riyadh, and Baghdad. It would exceed the temperature of Mirs, every capital city in the Mediterranean basin on the same May afternoon. The UK, at 35 degrees, is not behaving like the UK. It is not even behaving like the Mediterranean. It briefly occupied the thermal space of the Arabian Peninsula. Temperatures associated with desert climates at latitudes 20 to 25 degrees south of Britain's position, delivered to a country whose buildings, infrastructure, health systems, and population were designed for an average May maximum of 17 degrees Celsius. That 18-degree gap between design temperature and actual temperature is the number that translates into track buckling, care home overheating, reservoir evaporation, and excess deaths. It is the number that the record-setting sequence confirms is no longer an outlier. It is the new upper range of what a British May can produce. The water resource emergency that runs simultaneously with this heat wave's record temperature pursuit reached its own milestone this week, when the Environment Agency's drought monitoring data confirmed that soil moisture deficits across southern and central England were among the most severe recorded for this point in the calendar year. Southeast Water's formal warning that Ardingly Reservoir entered May at 64% of capacity, against a seasonal norm of 92%, and will not fully recover before the summer demand peak, sits against the backdrop of each additional 35-degree peak day, adding evaporative losses from that reservoir, from the chalk aquifers of East Anglia, and from the agricultural soils of the 20-plus counties sitting inside the heatwave zone. The 14-day statutory consultation window before a temporary use ban can take legal effect means that water company drought planning teams watching this week's escalating temperature records are making their notification decisions now before the peak day arrives, because the regulatory timeline runs ahead of the operational need. A 35-degree May day on top of the driest spring in 132 years in a reservoir already 28. Percentage points below seasonal normal is the specific hydrological scenario that water resource planners model as a drought-triggering event. Whether the hosepipe ban announcements that follow this week's records arrive in June or July will depend on whether the temperature continues toward or retreats from its current peak. But the drought trajectory that the record-setting heat wave is accelerating is already locked in, regardless of where the thermometer stops. The practical implications for every person in England during the days ahead of the peak are unchanged by the escalating record setting. The physiological vulnerability does not reduce because a record is being broken. It increases. A population that has had 0 weeks of thermal acclimatization since the cold snap of early May. A population still physiologically configured for spring now, being asked to manage 33, 34, but potentially 35 degrees in late May, faces the most acute, unacclimatized early season heat exposure in the UK's modern meteorological record. The England Amber Alert is the response to that reality. Keep homes cool, seek shade between 11 a.m. and 3 p.m., hydrate before thirst signals arrive, check on elderly and vulnerable neighbors, in person rather than by message, know the symptoms of heat exhaustion and heat stroke, and contact 999 immediately for any signs of heat stroke. Confusion, loss of consciousness, hot dry skin, cessation of